side of things. So I'll kick off. Good morning. For those of you I haven't met, you can see on the screen, name is Jenny Milne. As I said, bit full of the cold this morning, so James Gleave will fly co-pilot with me. Maybe it's too late to say this, but Happy New Year. I've been saying Happy New Year to lots of people because I was in America for 2.5 weeks with my PhD, so I sort of feel like I'm catching up. So welcome to the first cafe of 2024. For those of you that are familiar with it, remember the chat box is your friend. For those of you that are new, please just introduce yourself in the chat box. It's a great space to chat in and everybody does. Keep it positive. Today's all about sharing, and Sharon and Jeff have got lots to share with you. When you do put your name and welcome in the chat, please do include your postcode, just the very beginning of it, because we're just trying to keep a track of where people are based and it helps us for tracking impact. And obviously it's all about sharing ideas, and you'll hear from two great speakers. I always do this, but it's slightly different this time. I always just want to give a bit of background onto SRITC. I'm the founder of SRITC, but we've got two fellow directors, Alex Reid, who's with us today, and Ali McInroy. Some of them you may have met before in person or online. We then have as James, who's helping me out today. He's a musketeer, somebody who helps and volunteers with SRITC. That's currently being revamped. So if you want to get involved for an hour a month or just be involved with SRITC, that's a musketeer role for you. We also have some of our advisory board here with us today, and they're in front of you. They meet on a quarterly basis, and they're the ones, the fountain of knowledge for strategy and all that nitty-gritty stuff at the moment. And at the bottom there, you can see the people that are financially supporting SRITC. So that's just a bit of a who is involved and who's behind the scenes of SRITC. As usual, a bit about the SRITC and values, if you're not familiar with us. We're all about sharing and supporting each other, and it's always great to hear stories firsthand of how SRITC has helped people, whether it's in a community or with business, or even local authorities, which we'll hear today. So it's about championing and making sure that our voices are heard and that we look for a better future for rural and island transportation. So without further ado, some key highlights from me since we met in December. We've got some new team members. One of them is Nikki Brown, who you will see on the right-hand side if you scroll through, or on in front of your screen, scroll through. Nikki Brown joins us as Research and Impact Officer, and Bob Kane is joining us as what I'm calling a youth champion. So he will be championing everything from STEM and education to young people. For those of you in Scotland that haven't heard, Smarter Choices, Smarter Places, funded through Pass for All and Transport Scotland and ultimately Scottish Government, there have been changes to the funding, and it was announced just before Christmas that it was getting stopped. Now, what we've heard so far, and we're waiting for this to officially come through channels, is that there may well be a one-year stopgap community transition fund being offered, but as yet we haven't had the details. So when we hear something, we'll let you know, because obviously this impacts hugely against a lot of people that are here today and within the community. On a good note, last week when I returned from the US, I got the joyous news that SRITC actually got mentioned in Parliament. The Rural Minister has mentioned us on the back of the Rural and Island Parliament last year in connection with developing the Rural and Island Mobility Plan. So that's great news, and if you're on the news bulletin list, you should have the whole of her speech sitting in your inbox to look at. As I mentioned earlier on, we have musketeers, and we are looking for some enthusiastic people to contribute about an hour a month within SRITC, that you're passionate and enthusiastic about rural mobility and rural transport. So feel free to drop me an email or drop me a direct chat. It'd be great. As always, as a social enterprise, we're looking at new ways of raising funds, particularly given the news of cuts at the moment. So please, if you're shopping online, please do use the easy fundraising. I know a few people do, and it does make a difference. If you're not familiar with the concept, it's quite literally going to the website and then going to Tesco's or Amazon or whatever, and you just continue as normal, but they then gift money to the social enterprise, which every 5p helps. Alex is just running, or Ariana is just running some polls, and this is predominantly because of the funding that we get from Smarter Choices, Smarter Places, that we need to do some evaluation and look at the impact, and that's going to be even more critical for us as we go forward, looking for future funding. So just fill in the polls as they come up. That would be really appreciated. Last thing, some of you I'm sure want to know about my America trip. All I can say is a conference with 16,000 people approximately over 6 days is fairly intense going, but very enlightening. I could run cafes for the next 2 years on the people that I actually met in person finally, or met for the first time. One of the people I did meet, who's a regular cafe goer, isn't here today, is Dwight Mengel, because I then went on to do 4 days of field work in upstate New York. So at some point in time, I will share all of that with you, but a great experience. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from what's going on in America. So pretty much that's me. I'm now going to hand over to James, and it's going to be Jeff that's going to take the lead to begin with, and he's going to introduce himself from Rother District Council. Some of you may recognise him from being at the gathering last year, so no pressure, Jeff, but like to know what you've been up to since, and if the gathering has helped you in any shape or form. And Sharon from Transport East is a regular cafe attendee as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jeff and have a wee cough. But before I do, I should have said cake. How could I forget? Cake. Who's got cake with them today? Anybody? Because I can actually see you all for a change, all in one. Anybody got cake, or is it just me? Seriously, it's just me.
If it means anything, Jenny, I did have a donut before the cafe started.
I'm going to give you all the benefit of the doubt because it's January and you're all on diets, but nobody's got a piece of fruit. Liz, have you got a piece of fruit or have you got a cake?
No, I've got a piece of tiffin and I've almost finished it already, Jenny.
Oh, sorry, I should have done it at the very beginning. Tiffin's one of my favourites. Anybody got anything else? Rennie, have you got any bread?
Obviously, no bread. I've not been baking for a while. No, but it's my dog's 7th birthday today, so we've made carrot cupcakes yesterday. That's waiting for me downstairs because I forgot to grab it.
You'll need to take a photo and send it in the chat because I'm missing delightful bakes.
I haven't iced them yet.
We can have a picture later on then. And Kat's got her cup of tea. Right, over to you, Jeff. Are you there, Jeff?
Yeah, hi there. Morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. So as Jenny said, I was at the gathering. I'm just going to share my slides, a few images. Can someone let me know they can see that, please?
All good.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm the planning policy manager at Rother District Council, and here we are on the south coast. So part of my job is to write the new local plan for Rother. I'm a land use planner, not a transport planner, so I'm focusing on allocating sites for new housing and economic growth. At the gathering in May, I put forward a pitch that if we continue business as normal, that would mean allocating sites across our district by settlement size, continuing reliance on the car, increasing inequality and raising carbon emissions. And I said that we were at the start of our journey to create a rural strategy that bucked that trend. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, how we're looking to coordinate land use and transport planning. It's not helped by the fact that we, as a district council, do land use planning, and the county, the far bigger, wider area, deals with transport planning. So we need to try and bring the two together. So yeah, I didn't present any visuals in May, so I hope this will help. So this is Rother. Rother is the yellow area here. It's probably a place you've never heard of, but it's on the south coast. You can see it here, it's sitting between Dover and Brighton. It also, quite unusually, wraps around Hastings, which is its own separate council. And just to give you an idea of the sort of dispersed people we have in our district, Hastings is home to as many people in 30 square miles, as we are in 200. So much of Rother is located in the High Weald AONB, which is one of the best examples of a medieval field system in Europe, a land of small fields, hedges, woodland pockets, and a very dispersed settlement pattern, originally based around farmsteads. So that's the sort of area we have. We're about to consult on our local plan. And this diagram is borrowed from donor economics and tries to sort of show what planning does and how we seek to meet the needs of our community while protecting the environmental and community assets. So we've got two overall priorities which sit at the centre: green to the core, which is our response to the climate emergency, biodiversity crisis, and the highway of national landscape, and it's really our environmental policies, and live well locally, which is about sustainable placemaking, utilising the Building for Healthy Life guidance by the NHS, which is really, really good. It's really starting to be used in England to help to really push up the quality of places, and active travel guidance from Sport England and Active Travel England. So it's about higher densities. It's about places that are designed around walking, cycling and wheeling. And for us in the rural areas, it's focusing on identifying clusters of villages linked to larger places with shops, services and rail stations. So we've divided our area into 5 sub-areas. So this is our diagrammatic representation of that. So each of these places with a red dot has a station, and we've got 2 lines through our area. We've got an east-west line, and we've got which goes between Brighton and Ashford, and we've got a line going north up to London. So through that, we've created these sub-areas. I'm going to show you one sub-area to give you an idea of what we're talking about, which is here. Sorry. So yeah, so this is actually where I live. So Rye is a small town. It's got about 5,000 people. It's got really good services and shops. It's got a secondary school. It's got a mainline railway station. It's got buses to other places, and it's got these range of other smaller places around it. So each of these places, these villages, and I live in this one, Iden, has a population of about between 200 and 400 people. Each of these circles represents 3 kilometers, so it's not an enormous area, but it means that people generally drive, and they generally come to Rye to do various things, or they go to Hastings as well. So it's not, you don't just move between one area, but what we're trying to show is in a different way, so that to start a conversation really through our consultation, and for people to really think about where they live, how they relate to other places, and ensure that we direct infrastructure investment off the back of new development to these areas. We're working closely with East Sussex County Council, and they support the approach we're taking. Their new local transport plan is a real step on from where we were before, which is really exciting. It plans up to 2050 and really focuses on decarbonisation, and is majoring on public transport and cycling, walking and wheeling. And I think our approach is helping to inform them as well, because it's taking this approach of really focusing on journeys as opposed to just new growth. One interesting point that I found out actually at the gathering is that the routing company who were there had been working with the county to roll out demand responsive transport across the county, branded locally as Flexibus. So that also takes a sort of cluster approach. So for instance, you can use the app or phone up to book a bus ride with anywhere in this area, or into Rye to pick up the bus and transport links. So yeah, that's where we are. So we're going to go out to consultation with a whole range of normal type planning policies, but really major on this different cluster approach, and to see what responses we can get and refine that over time, and then put a full local plan out in a couple of years' time. So yeah, that's where I am. Thank you.
And I will hand over to Sharon if we can, please.
Morning, everybody. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yep, all good.
Yep.
Okay, right. So as I said in the chat, I'm Sharon. I'm from Transport East. I am the Regional Rural Mobility Lead. I've got a few slides to run through this morning. Some of them are a bit dry like this one, but just an overview of Transport East and who we are. So we're one of the 7 subnational transport bodies for England. You can see that map there on the right hand side. So Transport East, the little bit that sticks out in the east. So we have 5 authorities in our region that we represent. We also work closely with the Chambers of Commerce, Business, National Highways, Network Rail. We have 75 towns and cities, around 3.5 million inhabitants. That's forecast to grow by about another 500,000 in the next sort of decade. About 1.5 million jobs, just over that. Interestingly, 13 ports and 3 airports in the region. So quite a lot of global and international trade happening as well. We've got about 2,000 offshore wind farms, so a huge amount of generation of offshore wind energy, and housing and growth forecast as well to grow over the life of our strategy. We confirmed our strategy last year, so we have a strategy running until 2050. We have 4 priorities in our strategy, so decarbonisation, connecting our growing towns and cities, so that will be through improving connectivity across the region and across the county borders, energising coastal and rural communities. We have about 500 miles of coastline in the east. About 20% of our population live on the coastline. And then we also have something around unlocking our international gateways, so sort of making the most of the trade opportunities and the employment opportunities in those ports and airports. The information at the bottom is just a bit of a blurb around where STBs sit in terms of legislation. So they were created through the Devolution Act a few years ago. All of the STBs are tasked with creating a transport strategy for their region. And then centres of excellence, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail further on, were established through the Levelling Up white paper. So that set out the commitment to develop centres of excellence across the country. And then the Department of Transport tasked all of the STBs with setting up centres of excellence across a number of different topics. So for Transport East, we have around 1/3 of our population living in rural areas. We have 2/3 then living in transport deserts, so really poor access to regular public transport services, really poor digital connectivity as well. So we still have probably, like a lot of rural areas, poor broadband connectivity. It mitigates the opportunity for people to access services online, reduce their opportunity to travel as well. So it really does impact on everyday activities. So in terms of centres of excellence, there's no defined definition of what a centre of excellence is, but we're framing it as these sorts of points. So centres of excellence are around coordination and collaboration across our area, bringing people together, directly working with our local transport authorities in particular, really improving and supporting the ability of those transport authorities and local planning authorities to improve the services for the communities in their area and the services that they provide. A lot around reducing replication and saving money and resources. So that might be around producing regional reports, doing research across the region rather than having each local authority do that work on their own. So you know, those replications are reduced. A lot around sharing knowledge and experiences. We've been bringing people together over the last few years, and that's been really beneficial for them to understand what their counterparts are doing in other local authorities, you know, where the learning can be shared and experiences are shared. And then one of the real opportunities for us as an STB is to provide a service that local authority officers aren't able to do on their own. So whether that's just around procurement, you know, using framework contracts for them to be able to do research, procure consultancy services, and really just make sure that actually the work that we're doing is bespoke to our region as well. So for the Centre of Excellence, Rural Mobility, we started off looking at supplementing the baseline data So we already had a lot of data. Some of it's quite old. Didn't have a lot of grassroots data. We didn't have a lot of evidence around what actually was the case for the Eastern region in particular and for rural areas. So we commissioned a couple of people in this meeting, some real experts in rural transport to look at what was already out there in terms of evidence, in terms of case studies, and then bringing that together into an understanding of what's really out there. We looked at 15 topic areas, reviewed policy, strategy, innovation and good practice. We've got the takeaways in there as well in terms of what's working well in the pilots, what hasn't worked so well, where some of the evidence base is lacking. I think that was one of the sort of the key takeaways from this literature review, the lack of publicly available evaluations, especially of pilots that have been funded over the last decade or so, and then also a lack of what at the time was a lack of public policy around rural mobility in England as well. Is it 2023? I get confused now. So we did a survey across the whole of the East region. So we reached out to parish councils, so around 1,200 parish councils across those 3 counties. We had around just under 400 parishes respond, and this was about their views on access to local services in their area. I've just put on this slide here some screenshots of the dashboard, so you can go onto the Transport East website, you can access this dashboard and have a look, have a play around with it. You shouldn't be able to break it at the moment. But one of the things we found was that the majority of our parish councils found that their communities were travelling, for services that we would consider everyday services. There just was a real lack of things happening locally. So, there was almost an institutional need to drive and have access to vehicles in these areas as well. We asked about things like access to community transport, public transport, the types of services that they were having to travel to. One of the interesting things was that we could see some patterns around where local authorities had been making investments in sort of rural bus services. Those were actually really viewed quite favourably by the respondents. So, there is that kind of provide the service, do the publicity for it, and actually it is working as well. And where we have some of our rural rail routes as well, there was real positive views on those as services for local communities. And then over the summer, we've been running a call for evidence, our rural mobility inquiry. So we invited 6 independent commissioners, chaired by Dr. Scott Copsey from the University of Hertfordshire. And we've been asking across the region and beyond, and thanks to anybody here who responded as well, to look at sort of more in-depth and complex challenges for rural transport. So we had online responses. We also ran 5 in-person oral evidence sessions. So we looked at access to education, training, employment. We engaged with charities, community transport sector. We looked at businesses as well. So we had some really good responses from businesses across the region. Also our travel and tourism sector. We had some really good feedback from them on the challenges that they've been having. And also our local authorities also responded and took part. So what will be happening is in March, we'll be publishing the findings of this report. I can't give you too much away because obviously I need to let the MPs have their say on what we're finding in here. But basically, we've got a set of recommendations that we'll be publishing across for government, for Transport East as a statutory partner, and for local authorities and partners. So lots around improving access to services, reducing isolation in our rural areas, sort of improving positive social mobility for our future generations, and really trying to make the case for better investment in rural transport services. Okay, and then some of the other things that we've been doing. So we've been running a series of workshops and webinars, so bringing in sort of guest speakers, Sport England, Active Travel England, for example, Town and Country Planning Association, talking about how to implement some policies and strategies in rural areas. We've run a series of roundtables with the University of Hertfordshire. We've had 3 so far, and we're hosting an event with them and a webinar in the next couple of months, sort of summarising what those roundtables have found. We have been invited to give evidence to the Transport Select Committee on rural transport, so that was a really interesting piece of work. Really sort of, you know, making sure that our elected members understand the challenges that we've had. We've been working with the Department for Transport on their Future of Transport strategy. So that was published last autumn. That's been an ongoing piece of work. And then we've also been working with the department and the Connected Places Catapult to help shape the current Rural Transport Accelerator Fund. So that's open at the moment. There's £1 million of funding available to look at how to trial and test new pilots in rural areas. And then nearly at the end, so almost all of the STBs across the country have some work streams on rural transport. This is just a slide showing a huge amount of work that's going on. Renee's here from Midlands Connect with the digital travel hubs pilots. So there's lots going on collectively. It's a lot. Individually, there's a huge amount of guidance, reference materials available now. You know, the Southwest has their own rural strategy. We've got guidance on mobility hubs. We've got a document making the case for investment. So all the links to those further documents are on the Transport East website and on the individual STB websites as well. And then this is my final slide. This isn't my piece of work. This is a piece of work that's been done in the wider Transport East and England's economic heartland area. But this is the EV Ready tool. So it's looking at mapping current and future demand for EV infrastructure, so charging infrastructure. But what you can see is red is where there is already pretty good supply within the network, and then we've got blue and green are the sort of the areas that we don't have really good demand. So what you can see, if you're familiar with the geography of the East, is that we don't have a huge amount of public available charging infrastructure, and there are some areas that are really really poor in provision. So what this gives local authorities, charge point operators, for example, is the information that they need to invest in that network. And one of the big challenges we've found through the national group and the regional working is that decarbonisation in rural areas and the ability to attract charge point operators, for example, into rural areas is a bit of a challenge. So these are the sorts of tools that STBs are developing to help local authorities in particular plan for these going forwards. That is my last slide. So thank you very much for letting me speak today.